Joining me now to discuss is Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst and senior editor of The Atlantic, where he has just published this piece, Why Biden Just Can't Shake Trump in the Polls. Ron, always great to see you. I read the new piece. You argue that there are two things hindering Biden that don't enable him to distance from Trump. What are those two things?
Yeah. Good morning, Michael. And interesting analysis there. Look, I think there are four core factors that are shaping the environment for 24 that have changed the world since Trump and Biden faced each other the first time in 2020. The two big factors that are hurting Biden, the headwinds for him, are, as you said, the concerns about his age, 3/4 of Americans saying he's too old to do the job for a second term, and concerns about inflation. I talked to Stanley Greenberg, a longtime Democratic pollster since the 80s. He's polled for parties all over the world. And he points out that the destabilizing effect of inflation lasts longer in the minds and in the finances of average voters than political leaders often recognize. And then, though, there are two big factors on the other side that are weakening Trump. And one of those is abortion, the majority support for maintaining legal abortion. And the second really is insurrection and democracy, the belief that the majority belief in the public that his actions after 2020 were illegal and unconstitutional. And when you take age and inflation on one side and abortion and insurrection on the other side, what you see right now is that sums to stalemate.
With regard to Biden, here's what you wrote in part. You said, the other big change weakening Democrats is that Biden is older now. In polls, as many as 3/4 of Americans have said they believe Biden is too old to serve effectively as president. Far fewer Americans express that concern about Trump, though he's only 3 years younger than Biden. Images of Biden walking stiffly or clips of him intermittently mangling his sentences, which he's prone to do even when younger, leave many Democratic strategists in a perpetual state of anxiety, fearful that the president is one slip, physical or verbal, away from political disaster. Are you convinced, Ron Brownstein, that he will be the Democratic nominee?
Well, I think no. Well, look, we don't know what's going on in his mind, but I think the vast majority of Democrats believe that Biden is going to be the nominee, and they have to figure out a way to make this work with him on the top of the ticket. First of all, Biden has been a more effective legislative president than almost anyone expected. I think that's a fair statement. And he looks at those accomplishments and says, I still have my fastball. Second, I think him and the people around him are much more worried than you suggested that a fight to succeed him would tear apart the Democratic Party precisely as it needs to go up against what I think virtually all Democrats and many non-Democrats view as an existential threat to American democracy in Trump. And then third, people don't hand over power as president very often. Who was the last president did not run for re-election? I think it would be Calvin Coolidge, right? Did not seek at least one re-election. So, there are lots of reasons why he should consider stepping off the stage, but there are also some powerful ones for why he would stay in. And I think most Democrats believe that it's going to be the latter course, and they've got to figure out a way to make this work. And by the way, if you look at the 2022 results, despite all of the problems that Biden faces, they were all present there in 2022 as well. And in the states that will likely decide the winner next year, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin among them, abortion and democracy did outweigh inflation and concerns about Biden in those key governor's races.
Ron, I fully recognize that many watching today are not going to appreciate my analysis. They're not going to appreciate the commentary, my effort to try and game out what might happen. For the record, I've spent the last several weeks talking about Trump and all of his legal impediments. But what if Donald Trump's nomination collapses under the weight of the indictments, right, next spring? The argument then that, Joe Biden's the one who did and can beat Trump goes away. And if there's another Republican nominee, Democrats could find themselves locked in with the president of the United States.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of concern about Biden running against a different Republican, especially one who is younger. I think Democrats 6 months ago thought DeSantis was clearly a tougher candidate to beat than Trump. I think many of them are not so sure right now that DeSantis is actually tougher than Trump. But look, Biden's vulnerabilities are real. I mean, there is clearly a majority of the country that is very everything he's managed to achieve in his first term, especially with a big trio of economically related bills. That is real. I think Democrats are frustrated and a little unnerved by how sustained that resistance has proven in polls, despite all of the league growing for Trump. If you kind of consider the overall landscape against anyone other than Trump, it could be difficult. But Trump sure looks like a commanding favorite right now in the Republican race.
Quick final comment relative to the Republican race. We showed that Wall Street Journal poll that shows Trump still maintaining his grasp on the GOP. Is that a reflection of an adherence to him or a reflection on that field that we all saw on the debate stage 2 weeks ago?
I think it's more the former than the latter. I mean, I think what Trump has done is successfully convinced, and it wasn't really hard, the majority of the Republican electorate to view the indictments the way he wants them to see them, as an attack on them through him. Look, his message from the beginning has been that I am, in effect, the human wall that will protect you against all of the forces in society that he alleges, and many Republicans believe, are trying to marginalize them. And he has basically made this just the latest manifestation of that. So supporting him in the primary becomes a way to stand up to the liberal establishment and the deep state and all of these other forces. But it is worth noting,
I think you're right,
inside the circle of the Republican coalition, there are a majority of voters who say they do not want Donald Trump to be president again if he is convicted of a crime. So you've got two candidates who are defined more by their weaknesses than their strengths heading into this potential rematch.
Ron, your piece today in The Atlantic, as usual, is terrific. Thank you for being here.